This is not a prolonged dunk on the Cats movie, not that it doesn't deserve the dunks. As you'll be able to tell, you are not going to get 30 seconds into talking about the Cats movie without talking about its problems, let alone 30 minutes, so I will talk a lot about its problems. But those videos already exist. Here are a few. You should watch them. In a sec. Give me a few minutes first. What those people are noticing, what everyone who watches Cats notices, is that Cats isn't just bad, it's bad and weird. That weird badness provides a lot of material for people to sort of stare wide-eyed and express their confusion and frustration, and they're totally right to. But for me, there was a level of joy in it, and because I'm, well, me, it's going to take me about 5,000 words to explain why. Strap in. Cats, the musical, is one of the longest running pieces of musical theater on both Broadway and the West End, with over 7,000 and just under 9,000 performances, respectively, in their initial runs. It's about a cast of anthropomorphic cats: Bustopher Jones, the cat about town, Skimbleshanks, the railway cat, Asparagus, the theater cat, and so on, who are all attending the Jellicle Ball, where the most respected, eldest cat, Old Deuteronomy, will select one cat to go up to the Heaviside Layer, which is a reference to the real kennelly Heaviside Layer of the atmosphere that's notable for being the part of the atmosphere that reflects radio waves, but here functions as a sort of confused merging of heaven and reincarnation. But to be clear, going to the Heaviside Layer is something desirable. Along the way, they are lightly messed with by McCavity, the mystery cat, before defeating him, and then Grisabella, the glamour cat, who used to be beautiful and glamorous, but is now ostracized and abandoned, is selected to go to the Heaviside Layer. And I think it's kinda good. It's not like my favorite musical, not really close, but I don't dislike Cats, the musical, for what it is. To be clear, I am 100% qualified to make this assessment because I sorta did a couple of years of stage crew in high school. We're not going to talk about how many years ago that was. But anyway, you have to judge the show by the standards of its form, and musical theater is kinda awkward as a narrative form, extremely unsubtle and very slow-moving. Every time a character is introduced, or changes their mind, or does anything consequential, it needs a song. That pace can be frustrating for people who are fans of other narrative forms, myself included. Shows that are narratively heavy, like ones based on books, often buckle a little bit, like Les Mis alternately dwelling on powerful emotional moments and racing through entire chapters of plot in minutes or even seconds. Cats is not narratively heavy. The songs, which are mostly children's poems about cats set to music, mostly just name and describe the cats, and a lot of what story there is done through staging and dance. And that's really the key. Cats doesn't really work as an album. The music's not bad, but it's not made of hit singles like some of its peers are. Of other really long-running Broadway shows, Phantom's got The Phantom of the Opera, The Music of the Night. Wicked's got Defying Gravity, Popular, No Good Deed, For Good. Chicago, All That Jazz, The Cell Block Tango, We Both Reached for the Gun, Roxy, Mr. Cellophane, The Lion King, The Circle of Life, I Just Can't Wait to Be King, Be Prepared, Hakuna Matata, The Lion Sleeps Tonight and Can You Feel the Love Tonight, Les Mis, The Work Song, I Dreamed a Dream, Castle on a Cloud, Master of the House, Stars, Red and Black, Do You Hear the People Sing, One Day More, Empty Chairs at Empty Tables. Cats has, well, it's got memory. But the word for Cats is exhilarating. It is lighthearted and energetic and athletic. It is a 2-hour and 40-minute ride where you get to watch as these people, some of the best singers and dancers in the whole world, dress up in cat costumes and fucking go for it. Pour out all their energy, all their talent, all their skill, and do it with all of their being over and over again 6 days a week. It's theatrical. Over the past several months, the internet's discovery of AI-generated images has produced a lot of hand-wringing. Can artificial intelligence make art better than humans can? If not now, is it just a matter of time before it can? Well, no. Not because they're bad, but because they're not art. I don't mean that in an elitist way. Art doesn't have to be good or pleasing or skilled or successful, let alone highbrow, but it does have to attempt to engage with its form as an active expression. Since we're going to need a term for things that have the characteristics of artwork but are produced without artistic intention and therefore lack the ability for the viewer to internalize artistic choices as a communication of feeling or meaning, let's call it kitsch. Okay, so to be fair, kitsch is a nebulous concept because art is a nebulous concept. Whether the one qualifies as the other is going to depend on your definitions, and indeed there have been efforts by real artists to rescue kitsch as art, although I'd argue that inherently makes it not. Okay, look, I am using the terms in these specific ways, let's accept that and keep going. The pictures made by something like Crayon, the text made by something like GPT-3 cannot be art because they do not reflect creative choices or creative conversation. I can tell Crayon to make me pictures of Darth Vader by Salvador Dali, and it'll churn these out, but it cannot make any effort to translate Darth Vader conceptually into the artistic conversation that Salvador Dali was participating in. It doesn't know what choices Dali was making, let alone why he might make them. It doesn't and cannot know what that means. It can only construct a facsimile of a Dali. As time goes on, its facsimiles will continue to improve, but they will always be facsimiles. They will always be kitsch. Now, at this point, you may have noticed another little bit of slipperiness in my point, which is, I said, can artificial intelligence make art better than humans can? I did not say the related question, can neural network generated facsimiles of art replace real human art in our society? Because the answer to that is, to an increasing degree, yes. Machine-generated prose will find a place in our society next to human-written copywriting. Machine-generated images will replace human-crafted visual design in some situations. I'm not saying Netflix will eventually run cartoons where someone comes up with a base concept and genre, gives it to a neural network to generate a character concept, gives it to another neural network to write the scripts, gives it to another neural network to generate full illustrated character designs, and then feeds that into another neural network that turns that machine-generated script and those machine-generated designs into 20 minutes of animation. We're not there. We're not on the immediate verge of being there. We're closer than we're really ready to deal with, but we're not there. That level of automation will probably turn out to be impossible in practice. But where the machine learning processes hit limits, can't quite perform up to the required standard, they will still be used to build frameworks into which skilled human labor, absolved as much as possible of any passion, creativity, or drive, can be poured. There are some ways this is not terrible, and rest assured, these ways will be used to sell us on it as it happens. For example, graphic designers can take their designs and project them automatically onto generated mockups, removing a bunch of the most menial labor from their work. There will be real cost savings, and sometimes those cost savings will even help actual people. But the difference is meaningful. Art reflects intentionality and communicates other people's deepest feelings and emotions. Kitsch, on the other hand, is bland or incoherent or masturbatory. So, to the degree kitsch supplants art in our day-to-day experience, doesn't that inherently mean that interconnection, that the beautiful opportunity to feel what someone else wanted you to experience, is being replaced just a little bit more by the noisy, isolated solipsism of anything you already like? Anyway, Cats, the movie, is a 2019 adaptation of the musical brought to you by Universal Pictures and director Tom Hooper. It is, by all accounts, very bad. A lot of attention has been given to the difficulty of adapting Cats to the screen, especially because of the unique challenges of adapting stage musicals to the screen in general, so it's worth noting that Cats' film adaptation was really substantially overdue. Of the 12 longest-running musicals in Broadway history, 1 is Cats, 7 already had film adaptations, 2 are adaptations of films, 1 relies on extensive explicit nudity, and 1, Wicked, which is 20 years younger than Cats, has a 2-part film adaptation coming out over the next 3 years. The big question, obviously, was how you construct something movie-like out of Cats, which, as we've discussed, leans on attributes suited to the stage and not on attributes like narrative, which are suited to film. But in the era of The Greatest Showman, this is the greatest show! It's hard to say it's impossible, so they turned to Tom Hooper. And that makes sense, he directed Les Mis. Hooper, an acclaimed director of mostly British television, including the acclaimed miniseries Elizabeth I and John Adams, made the transition into prestige film with, in 2009, The Damned United, and in 2010, The King's Speech. Beyond his ability to create some really effective period settings, the big thing that Hooper is known for is his use of unusual lenses, colors, and angles to create disconcerting but powerful images, including in shots that don't usually seem to call for it, especially for generating odd, powerful close-ups that create a kind of hyper-reality, magnifying the performances of his routinely excellent casts, who frequently walk away with awards of their own. Now, looking at a lot of the storytelling choices Hooper makes, the casting of Eddie Redmayne as a trans woman in The Danish Girl, the way people and events in his adaptations of true stories are radically changed or recharacterized in service of making a more conventional narrative, and the way he throws the same visual style at very different moments in stories, for some critics, Hooper's striking visual look comes across less as evidence of an original or innovative vision, and more as evidence of a fairly limited director whose tools happen to be suited to a specific kind of very conventional prestige drama film. Either way, with Les Mis, Hooper escalated that effect by using the live musical performances of the actors as I stare into the void, supplemented by an instrumental performance recorded later, rather than, as is typical, having the actors' lip-sync performances recorded in studio. It would be difficult to argue that was good for the songs, and at times it's honestly "Can this be true?" really distracting, but sometimes that fixation, that escalation, lands exactly right, taking the momentous melodrama that underpins Les Mis and making it as big as humanly possible. Every word that he says is a dagger in me. And that brings us back to Cats, because Cats finds Hooper very much outside his comfort zone. There's no period piece here, very little drama, and very few intense individual character moments that he can bring his camera to bear on. So he's tried a few things. He's had huge sets constructed to make the actors appear to be cat-sized. He's cut the musical down by almost a third of its runtime, from 2 hours and 40 minutes to 1 hour and 50, and in the hour and 50 he's found space for new dialogue sections and a new Taylor Swift song too. He's elevated a character named Victoria from a dancing role to give the film a sort of protagonist, and of course he used computer-generated imagery to make them all look like cats. Okay, let's talk about that. It's true that a lot of the effects simply aren't finished. You will be badly thrown watching characters' faces slide around on the fronts of their heads when they turn them, presumably an early mock-up that at some point, possibly more than one point, was supposed to be iterated. The production doesn't seem to know what to do with the characters' hands and especially their feet. Should they have paws, human limbs, something in between? And it varies not just from character to character or sequence to sequence, but at times from shot to shot, presumably because someone, which is to say Hooper, changed their mind about the look. but some shots couldn't be revisited. The way the human faces blend seamlessly into the CGI bodies often looks like someone just waved the Photoshop blur tool at the screen. That's all true, and while I'm going to talk a bunch about elements of design, that's the last time I'm going to go after the technical competence of the rendered images, the quality of the CGI.
As cast members of the motion picture Cats,
reports after the release indicated that effects artists at MPC Vancouver worked 80 to 90-hour weeks on Cats, many of them staying at the office overnight for days in a row. When the automated digital fur technology process, in some cases, created folds and gaps that gave the visual impression of buttholes and vulvae, people were tasked with manually painting over that effect frame by frame. According to the artists, Hooper, whose experience with animation was minimal, wasn't able to make clear what he was looking for or to learn what was involved in CG production, giving confusing instructions, insisting on seeing finalized effects rather than demos, and berating staff both individually and in meetings, leading to a chaotic production where designs had to be revisited over and over again until the whole visual effects process, hopelessly behind schedule, had to be rushed out in a couple of months, with effects so unfinished that Universal sent theaters an unprecedented updated version of the film, with more finished, not actually finished, but more finished effects, after it had already released. And then MPC Vancouver was closed, and its artists were laid off.
Nobody more than us understands the importance of good visual effects.
And if you've been paying attention for the past few years, you're probably not surprised to hear that. While those conditions are extreme, those kinds of conditions aren't just normal, but increasingly so. Crunch and burnout conditions, a pattern of massive overwork followed by layoffs, often accompanied by regular long-distance moves to find new work, have become normalized at these visual effects studios. Disney, in its haste to hit every single release window available and have a weekly drop of TV shows with movie-grade, if not exactly mega-budget grade, visual effects, has become notorious for dramatically overworking its artists, demanding dozens of finalized versions of some shots or effects, refusing to settle until late in production on a look for a show that artists can confidently work toward, leading to burnout that takes months to recover from, to the extent that many artists now request not to work on Marvel projects at all, a request that's increasingly untenable as Disney moves to dominate the space. And despite all that, recent shows and films have gone live with some great effects right next to ones that just don't look like they are as intended. Other films which initially set ambitious release dates have been forced to accept lengthy delays as the backlog at visual effects studios grows, as burned out workers either leave the industry or are unable to produce work as quickly. Shazam 2 and Aquaman 2, for example, are now expected to come out 16 and 23 months, respectively, after filming wrapped. And why? I'm not talking about movies like Top Gun 2 or Avatar, where the blowout visual quality is the whole thing, where there'd really be not much other point in making the thing. I'm talking about counting the pores on the big angry green man. I'm talking about an MCU that has struggled to imitate the visual power it achieved back when it used those effects sparingly and with care. I'm talking about the ludicrous amount of effort and money put into trying to reconstruct a literally perfect CGI Luke Skywalker that is still a less convincing presence on the screen than Jar Jar Binks. And they're not doing it for no reason, they're doing it for you. Because every time someone goes for an evocative and workable but not perfectly lifelike design, you, the movie-discussing, video essay-watching, super-enfranchised viewer, get upset online because they are making $200 million bets and they're so scared of you, the vanguard viewer, that they'll work an entire industry half to death, not because it makes better work, but just so you can't say they should have done more. So I am begging you, when you see an effect that doesn't look quite right, or doesn't look quite done, notice that, acknowledge it, and set it aside, evaluate that it's not quite right, and then also try to meet the movie on the terms it was aiming for. And if you come to me and say the problem with Cats is that the CGI is low quality or unfinished, I'm gonna be very sad. One of those things is true, but hot damn is it not what's wrong with Cats. And with that said, I can talk about the design. 'Cause they're all naked. Here's the thing, they don't look like bipedal cats, they don't look like actors wearing cat outfits, or people with some light cat features. They look, very specifically, like naked furry OCs. To be clear, that's not a dunk, that's just what they look like. And Cats is a Broadway musical about dancers in cat leotards prancing around campily and meowing at each other.
Meow.
It's okay for it to be kinda erotic, but it's not actually really sexy here. It's less sexy than the show, it's nudity without eroticism. They're just naked people acting like they're dressed. Okay, the reason why every Cats take you've heard features people saying things about the movie and then just kinda shrugging is because they're naked furry OCs and I don't really know why. It's the biggest creative decision in the movie, it's completely omnipresent, and why? When Hooper says that he wanted to use practical effects, but they were too heavy for the actors to perform in, and the visual effects he wanted required full face prosthetics that prevented actors from emoting, that indicates he always wanted a substantial departure from the show in the direction of something more like literal. Likewise, the enormous sets. And let's be clear, changing things in Adaptation to try to achieve a different effect is fine. If you want to watch the show, you can. There's a tape, it's for sale, here's the Amazon page. This is something else, and it's fine for it to be something else. And there are changes that make a lot of sense, like elevating Victoria to an audience surrogate really does help because the few times the cast members do spike the camera, in the same way a stage singer might sing out to the audience, it's really disconcerting. And in this sea of celebrities, having the lead role be a trained ballerina and not another recognizable face, I think it really works. Really draws your attention. Underneath the cat skin, the cast is actually really strong. Filled with people who have great screen presence who probably didn't command A-lister salaries, many of whom have real singing or dancing chops. Even if when Ian McKellen steals the show and you're sitting there watching, feeling kind of impressed.
Gus is the cat at the theater door.
And to show her approval, naked catgirl Judi Dench splays one leg straight into the air, and your whole brain just crawls out your ears trying to get away. When the camera pulls in on Jennifer Hudson singing Memory,
the meaning of what happiness is.
Yes, Hooper's just stealing his own bit from Les Mis. Yes, it's really damaged by how she's piloting a CGI puppet catgirl VTuber avatar the whole time, but it's still legitimately powerful. But overall, it's not clear what Hooper is going for, and the two big strengths of the original have been lost. One of those strengths, the energy and dynamism, the way tons of people have to all nail their parts over and over again, is lost. That can be a tough thing to translate onto film, but probably not impossible, and Hooper hasn't tried. Cutting the production by an hour reduces the scale massively, not just in the total duration, but in shrinking down individual songs and removing dance sections, taking something that felt hard, felt physically demanding, and turning it into popcorn viewing. Likewise, having some of the parts be speak-sung by people who aren't showing much musical skill reduces the overall flow, even if other performers are excellent vocalists. But the biggest cause, I think even more than all that, is the CGI, which is to say, even though the film relies on real actors doing real performances of the songs and dances, it looks like a cartoon. It looks like a cartoon because cat people aren't real people, especially combined with the way the sets play with scale, the frequently garish lighting, and some very strange shot choices, just in terms of setting up the very basic geography of scenes. It all feels drawn onto the frame. And if I can't see the humans pouring their souls out for real, if I can only see all of the tools that would be used to stand in for that, how am I supposed to be blown away by it? And then Hooper will pull out a handheld camera to move through these scenes that again look like they're animated. And I can't tell you, it's incredibly jarring. The other strength lost is the joy of it. These songs are children's poems about cats. They're about the personalities we impose, specifically the personalities children impose onto the cats they see, and so they're playful poems. They imagine the cats as kind of self-serious and pompous because they're cats. It's funny, but there's still a dignity in it because the cats believe it. Gus, the old shaky cat that hangs out by the theater and behind the pub, imagines himself a serious actor. You can imagine him staring from backstage as the actors rehearse, memorizing their lines as if one day he might be called upon to go up and do their soliloquies. But in the film, the element of fantasy is lost. He just is an aging actor thinking of old times. McCavity is a sneaky cat that can get anywhere, that'll grab the pearls out of the jewelry case or raid the pantry that you were sure you shut tight, and soon you attribute to him every little noise, and you're surprised when you heard a creak behind you and then he turns out to be in front of you instead, and you imagine that he thinks of himself as Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime. In the film, McCavity is a wizard assassin. In the show, Jenny Anydots, the Gumby cat, is an older, lazy tabby cat, but you invent a secret life she gets up to at night, teaching the beetles and the cockroaches and the mice. In the film, Jenny Anydots is whatever the fuck Rebel Wilson is doing. And all of this in the show is headed towards this big old representation of death, toward the moment when Grisabella, the sad outcast cat who's got nothing left but her memories, leaves the earth and travels to the Heaviside Layer, a really simple but charming way of talking to children about the fact that pets die sometimes. And the film has honestly bungled everything so badly that people coming to Cats for the first time with the movie seem confused about whether the Heaviside Layer is death or not. So everything that's charming and impressive about the show has been lost, and in its place is, well, whatever it is, it's so incoherent that I don't think anyone really knows. Over the past few months, the newly merged Warner Bros. Discovery has embarked on a sweeping path of cancellations and removals, abandoning all new scripted media on WB's cable channels TNT and TBS, canceling dozens of projects, including many that were both popular and critically acclaimed, especially notably including much of the corporation's media made by and for queer people and people of color, much of the existing scripted content in that vein continuing only because they'd just been renewed by the previous executive regime. Dozens of shows and movies were removed from HBO Max, most of them made totally unavailable through any legal channel, although most of these will at least survive, at least for a little while, through other means. And then there's those few others, including movies Batgirl and Scoob Holiday Haunt, which were both reportedly within days or weeks of being ready for release, and the second season of Chad, a well-reviewed and generally well-watched cable comedy, which was done, shot, and edited, and cancelled on the day it was set to premiere. This is art, finished art, that people made, and to be clear, for a tax break, Warner Bros. Discovery destroyed it. That's just the word for what they did. Sometimes stuff is canceled, sometimes stuff is reshot, sometimes the studio mandates changes, sometimes some people's work just gets completely taken out during editing. But this is the whole thing that everybody worked on, and it existed, or as close to existed as it's possible to draw any kind of distinction about. And it's just gone now. Even the people who made Batgirl don't have it. aren't even allowed to look at it. To be clear, I do not care whether Batgirl was good or bad. Some sources said in test screenings it did well, others that it did poorly, and others tried to split the difference to say that it was good enough for a streaming release but not up to snuff for a theatrical one. All of the people involved have incentives to misrepresent the truth, and I don't care. And there's a distinct character to the way people complained about it, the way it seemed like a lot of people cared less about the destruction of a work of art and cared more about the loss of a chance to see Michael Keaton as Batman, as if any of them have watched Michael Keaton's Batman movies in years. And I don't care whether Michael Keaton's reappearance as Batman was a good idea or not either. The new management argued that this was all required as cost-cutting, given WBD carries tens of billions of dollars of net debt. Fair enough. Of course, that cost-cutting only makes sense if those projects were going to lose money, and clearly they were originally approved by executives that thought they were going to make money. But really, that's neither here nor there, because I accept that this is a business, and the business has to at least break even, or none of the creative people get to make their creative stuff. I also accept that these people, both the ones who are in charge now and the ones who used to be in charge, would absolutely lie to us in public if it helps sell that their corporate strategy is better than some competing one. So maybe on this one they're right, and maybe somehow they need those tax write-offs so badly that they have to do this. I am forced to accept that that is possible. Here's what gets me. They aren't sad. Hollywood has always been a business, but it's always been a romantic business. There's always been a reason the executives were trying to make money in movies instead of selling cars. And as much as they've always been chasing fads and always seemed a little confused about what good stories are, they've always wanted to make movies. But somewhere in the mega-budget blockbuster revolution and the streaming revolution and the wave of mergers and consolidation, I feel like a lot of that has been lost. Because they're not sad. In fact, they're proud. In between all the cutting things they're saying about the work of the artists they're paying, and all of the digs about how weird it is for people who talk about art to be sad about the destruction of art, what they're really talking about is how courageous they're being, because it's all just a homogeneous mass of content you can manufacture like bricks, and therefore the only correct content bricks to make are the ones with the highest ROI. Of course, that's the same logic that leads to bubbles and then to bubbles bursting, but more importantly, it is a process that is fundamentally hostile to art, that seeks to automate it as much as possible and therefore not to make art, but kitsch. Cats is bad. Cats is catastrophically bad. Cats is catastrophically bad art. Possibly the weirdest thing about Cats is this. The few times a beat basically lands, when there are 5 consecutive seconds of successful storytelling, it feels like a momentous triumph. When Victoria and Mr. Mistopheles rub their cheeks in a feline gesture of affection, it's not good, because nothing that's happened so far has given it any weight, but it is basically coherent, so I pumped my fist. When McCavity, the Napoleon of crime, slipped and fell on Nelson's column, probably the only joke in the movie that lands at all, I wanted to stand up and applaud, because they are trying so hard. As everything goes further and further off the rails, you can feel them trying harder and harder to make it all click. And they don't get close. Every one of those takes you've seen, every one of those dunks, they're all absolutely right. I don't know if I could tell you anything about the movie that makes it worth your time, and I'm definitely not saying you should watch it. But now, when so much stuff feels like it was made by a machine, not even that, feels like it's making me a part of the machine, manufacturing my take on it being cosmic or diverse or grounded or retro now, Cats feels like it was made by people. People fucking up.